Greetings to the raccoons joining us all around the world. I'm Márton Polgár and I've been here before, except I anglicized my name this time around. And today I would like to talk about renovation in Raku land. The means, the importance, the concrete things to do about it. So let's get going. So first off, there are these questions that we are often confronted with. Does Raku have something? Does Raku have books, other learning materials, state-of-art documentation, profilers, debuggers? I think you can see the point. And there are a couple of responses we can give to these questions. I'm going to give some time to at least see the different topics, and maybe I could elaborate a bit on the last one. Here I'm mostly thinking of some sort of management means to change the course of events rather than GitHub workflows or something like that, although that's also a possible interpretation. So there are a couple of things that we all hear or say. So, for example, there is this one, Raku is a young language. Okay, for how long? It's not really a virtue that a language is young, and as time passes, we can say this less and less, let's be honest. Then there is this one, of course, it would be nice, there is probably no technical barrier to do it, if only there was somebody to do it. There is this overall sentiment and feel like there is no backing corporation, there aren't enough contributors, so everybody feels a bit sorry. So there are these offshoots in this presentation that could be their own presentation, but I'm not going to talk a lot about them. I will only scratch the surface. So first, for this sentiment that we don't have enough contributors, I couldn't say that it's wrong, but let's face the facts. Raku's design is mostly stable now. It's not really the time to attract absolutely like greenfield newcomers to the project. And also, if we take a look at the size of the user base, probably retention in itself won't be enough. Actually, probably it would be more important than retention to somehow attract new people, possibly more new people than the number of people we currently have. And this is definitely something that needs work. Both PR work and like making the offer of Raku, the Raku community, the tech stack appealing. And also I think often when we say if somebody did it then it would be great, I think one really has to invest into lowering the barrier of contribution. So I have the impression that we could make a better job at knowledge sharing when it comes to the core language. And also I would like to at least slightly mention that I think it would be good to think about what is the task of an architect for a project like Raku. Is it a good manager or is it a good hacker? And I think there should be some kind of balance. Obviously, in the open source world, a manager in itself won't achieve anything, but I think a good hacker without doing any sort of management is also an own goal, basically. But there are some good news, and I discovered them later on, not much after my presentation last year. So Raku does have profilers, LSPs, books, great documentation, I would say. I might be biased. Anyway, so it's not all lost. There is way more content than we make use of or than we are even aware of. So for this sentiment, Raku is a young language. It's almost like a catchphrase at this point. Raku is a young language with long history. And throughout that long history, a lot of things have been created. So the actual irony is that actually there have even been Unbitrot events, which shows that somebody already recognized this maintenance problem years ago, and there was a workflow for it. So we might need to unbitrot the unbitrot events. And I wanted to point out the doc team as a workflow, as sort of a management entity as well, for all the work they did throughout mostly this year. Probably Richard Hainsworth will say more about it, I would think. So throughout this year, the site has been unbroken. It was largely undeployable for some time. A new site design has been introduced simultaneously. New content is being added, and I think this is also an important one, that there are plans going forward. There is some sort of workflow. Things didn't just happen out of the blue, going nowhere. And also I wanted to mention the initiative of Lizmat from a couple of years ago, the Collect, Conserve, Remaster project, which was mostly for blog posts and Raku-related written materials and keeping them up to date and usable, because my talk is very much in that spirit. So here I would like to collect the general considerations regarding maintenance, now that we realized that we actually have certain stuff, even though sometimes it's getting old. So one very important point is that it needs to be maintainable from two aspects. It needs to be maintainable for a long time and with little resources. So this is quite a challenge given to us. And also, quite relatedly, knowledge sharing will be key. This is, I think, always very important if you need to maintain anything for a longer time. So the choice of technology itself is pretty important here, because we might want to pick stable technology, something that has support today and even tomorrow, even when somebody else has to maintain the already written tools and software. And the other thing is that dog fooding might be useful here. If we don't go stable, at least maybe we should use our own tools. Because I would hope that it's easier to get volunteers within the community for Raku tools than for any other arbitrary programming language, for example. It's definitely going to be easier to find people who can help out if there is some technical problem. And the third one is that there is some sort of positive feedback loop, because you can create a tool that is a client for some existing Raku technology. So you can like test it, try it out, you have a reason to maintain it. So dog fooding isn't the worst possible solution. Sometimes it's just not available, so one needs to be careful. And also for automations, I think first like automated builds and testing, CI stuff comes to mind. But I think there can be other means as well. In general, probably if you don't have a lot of people to maintain certain software, it's a good idea to delegate a share of the work to bots. So here I will digress again about what I call the geocentric approach to maintenance. So this is what we are used to, like you choose a formal technology and then use it, and the defined software, like whatever you wanted, you picked certain technology and got it done. The problem with this approach is that what do you do if there are no experts available? Or what do you do if the whole technology even goes obsolete? So these are always challenges for something that has to be maintained with only a couple of people for a longer period of time. So this would seem like science fiction only a couple of years ago, but maybe it's imaginable, at least now, that one could in the future, finding the appropriate technology, maybe somebody could define the software more and more in natural language, somewhat informally even. And then the technology you need to choose is the technology to turn it into implementation, to make the choice about the concrete formal technology, to write, I don't know, let's say some heresy, it writes Python, or I don't know. So the point is that this would be an AI inspired, or even like AI incorporating approach. Something that I don't know a lot of, but with large language models there are definitely many things that can be generated from informal language, and there are clear advantages here. So I'm looking forward to the future, because natural language changes slower and it's also accessible to more people. So basically we could say that natural language rots much slower than like very specific IT technology. And this could be a great win for all the projects that have to be maintained for a long time with little resources. And now you may ask, so what are you doing about it? Like now that you theoretized a lot, like let's see the actual work. So now, from now on, I will mostly talk about what I have been doing throughout mostly this year, with a little break in between. So yeah, for community workflows, there are plans and ideas mostly. I'm not that influential to single-handedly lay out complete community workflows, but to give you an idea, I have been drafting like how could one organize squashathons again, or how could one establish a new work group kind of inspired by the dog team. And these drafts are available at a GitHub repository that I have. This is kind of a draft repository, but since I wrote these two little markdown documents with the intention to publish them. These are more formal and more focused and not just a great mess. We'll be back to it later on. Then I have been thinking about Raku websites, and there are plans and there is some work that I have actually done in this regard. Then I wanted to mention the atom highlighter topic, which is also one of the few things that we sort of officially have under the Raku GitHub organization or user. Also, I've been casually picking up some Userspace code. I think this is really a broad topic and everybody could do this, and I'm encouraging all of you to do so. And also I've been doing some housekeeping in the ecosystem. I will give examples to these things. So first off, about the websites. We have modules.raku.org, which has been almost abandoned for a couple of years. And actually my progress with this is not so great, hence the confused face. I think it would be beneficial if it could coexist with Rakuland rather than being replaced by Rakuland. I have two arguments for this. First, I think Rakuland has an okay, very minimalistic layout, which can be a positive, but I like, as an alternative, the modules.raku.org community-oriented layout with more references to the language, to the community. It feels more lively, even abandoned, I would say. And the other point would be that it's community-owned, so to speak. So I think it could be an awkward situation with Rakuland, like which way do we choose? Do we basically take Rakuland away from the creators, or do we basically outsource a site that we originally had like as an official site? Now there are a couple of volunteers doing it. I don't feel comfortable with this idea, with either of these ideas, honestly, neither taking it away nor giving up on having a community owned and community maintained site, especially because of bit rotting and like people moving on and this sort of stuff. However, this is quite a massive modulicious site. Do I even say this right? It's Perl 5. I'm not really knowledgeable with this sort of stuff, so I was trying to approach a couple of people who I thought might be interested and know more about it, with little success, honestly. So for me personally, this has been too far off. I couldn't really get anywhere, any visible progress. For Raku.org, I'm much more optimistic, because Raku.org is overall a much simpler project, and here the basic idea I have is that we could change the tooling without immediately modifying anything about the site. And once we have a well understood maintainable tooling, then we might get more confident changing the content and the layout as well. So even to this day, it uses a tool called Moviv, created by the great Moritz Lenz, I think more than 10 years ago. So it's fair to say that this tool has aged a bit, and also it's a Perl 5 tool, not really maintained. So here I think you can see the dogfooding pattern. I replaced the templating and wrote a custom script to generate the same content from very similar templates using template 6. Actually, I had to work on template 6 and improve it to make it capable of doing this. And yeah, this is an example of getting your own clients. So for this, I actually have a working prototype available. I can actually generate the site from these altered templates, but it needs testing, it needs a build workflow, and there are things that I need to get more familiar with, like Caddy, if we want to use that as a server, and containers in general, so that maybe sooner or later we could establish a similar workflow to the doc site. For the atom highlighter, you would wonder, like, what's so special about anything that has atom in its name after all this time? Actually, the most important part of this repository is that it has a TextMate highlighter grammar. I'm not knowledgeable with this sort of stuff, but actually it's quite a widely used format. And for example, GitHub Linguist uses it. So for GitHub formatting, this is the grammar that is used to highlight Raku code. And this also introduces a couple of problems in itself, because you have PCRE, you have Oniguruma, different regex engines that are incompatible with each other. Let's not go there. Also, from what I know, Brian Scannell, also known as bscan, created an LSP and the Visual Studio Code plugin for Raku. It's called Raku Navigator, and from what I know, it de facto uses this particular highlighter. So what was the state when I entered? It was written in CoffeeScript and these funky CSON, so like CoffeeScript JSON files, and there was a little awk script trying to concatenate them in a clever way and generate these grammar files. And I mostly worked with the tooling here as well. So instead of these funky CSON files, now we have data in more or less documented Raku hashes that can be combined together in like usual Raku code rather than ad hoc awk templating. And there is a Raku script. Actually, there was a Raku script before as well, but now this Raku script generates everything, and it does so that eventually all you get is JSON, rather than executing a couple of scripts, temporary files, and all this stuff. You can just run one Raku script and you get JSON. So the input is like these Raku hashes, and the output is JSON. And there is still the question, like, do we care about Atom itself if it's called Atom Highlighter? And here is a journey that I have taken also this year. So Atom has been retired. I think that happened last year. Some people picked it up and forked it, creating Pulsar. And to talk about the background, Atom itself, now I have a little bit of a perspective to say, it had quite disappointing code base. They forked half of the universe and then didn't really maintain those forks. There is CoffeeScript all around because it was written in those 3 years when it seemed like a good idea. And the Node.js they are using, or like they were using, was also obsolete, and it was almost an experimental early stage of Node. They didn't seem to follow any particular conventions. It was all ad hoc. And for the spec tests, it also has a culture of testing. They used a fork of a fork of a fork of jasmine. And this is not an overstatement. It's really like a chain of several forking steps, and you get to this framework, which is used to this very day. Nobody could get rid of it just yet. It's crazy. So while I was working on the atom highlighter, I got interested in like how to install this. And there used to be APM. Now there is with Pulsar PPM. And actually I saw that they are renovating a lot of stuff. So I got involved. So I did a little decaffeination, so like migrating from CoffeeScript to JavaScript. And also recently I did migration to modern async from old school Node.js callbacks. One can actually read about this on the Pulsar blog for October. And the reason I'm talking about this is also that I had a pretty great experience with the Pulsar devs. They were not just nice and helpful and like welcoming and respectful with my work, but actually what I think is really a big difference, or like it's worth pointing out, that they had, I think, a very professional mindset, given that the base software they started off with was in much worse shape than basically anything related to Raku. I think it really makes a big difference that they are taking this seriously, and they are really, I think, good examples of volunteering and feeling passionate about a project. And also I learned a lot about like architecture, JavaScript, how to work with these people. So I think it was really a great journey. It's not completely finished yet, but I can see the light with the migration to async. There are some Userspace distributions that I experimented with or took over. So for HTML tag, I have taken over that one. That was mostly done before my previous talk. HTML template, originally a Karl Messak distribution. I'm mostly just publishing it as it stands now. I think it was last year when Kostas, who created Fakes, renovated that distribution, and I asked him to publish it because it's mostly abandoned as it is now. So that was really a no-brainer. I just wanted to make sure it's present. For file temp, I have taken over that one and will try to take care of it. By the way, this is quite a central distribution, and there are other distributions that are very important in the ecosystem. I could give examples if somebody wanted to know. And some of them are really in alarming states, honestly. So maybe we could try to take over more of these when it's visible that there are already problems with the distribution and the maintainer isn't really maintaining them anymore. Then some of you might have heard of DDT. It's a bit like MI6. I think I released a version of that, and then I basically shelved the project. There was a short-lived collaboration with the previous author that quickly went wrong, and it feels like it should be redone if I wanted to seriously get into it. I never really had the time and motivation to be serious about it. Then there is an interesting one, SpeedSH. For those of you who don't know, this is a tool that lets you generate shell scripts from a Raku-ish language for portability. This seemed like a great idea for my last job. So I still appreciate the idea. I think it's a unique one. However, this project is absolutely massive and it broke at some point. It's really hard to get around it. I have tried to debug it to get some clues how it works, but right now I feel it's just so big that fixing it is almost like if one day Rakudo was broken and somebody just told you to fix it. The grammar itself is quite huge. And I also mentioned ecosystem housekeeping, mainly in Raku community modules, but sometimes I move around and open pull requests for recently released modules. And these are mostly minor things, but I think it's important to see that these sort of things could keep somebody busy on a daily basis if done consistently to everything. I'm thinking of things like improving the GitHub workflows, looking for simple issues to be resolved. If there are pending pull requests, reviewing them and merging them. I think it's nice for aesthetics to detach forks. So rather than showing up as a fork, if it's unmaintained, the original one, then the fork should show up as a module on its own. And sometimes we can update file extensions. There are still a lot of obsolete file extensions out there. Encourage the use of use version. Sometimes migrating stuff to the so-called Zeph ecosystem. So here I listed a couple of modules or distributions that I can recall I have touched. And the point isn't that this is a lot, it's not that many, it's not that few. The point is rather that there are probably 50 more just in the Raku community modules user. And if we went around in the ecosystem, quite possibly there could be hundreds. So this is not like something that you could do in a couple of hours. If you always take, I don't know, half an hour or maybe an hour to do one, they will quite nicely add up. There's a lot of work to be done here and it requires no particular knowledge. And now we are getting to the takeaways. Many of them relate to this last one. So there is always something you can do. The same way I'm doing stuff with technology I don't even know that well. And it's also important to see that there's no need to be particularly competent at anything. You don't even need to have a niche. What you do need to be is motivated, interested, paying attention to little details. And this can really make a big difference, even in the short run, but especially in the long run, when you have automations to make sure that most of the distributions are working, for example. These things can really make a difference, especially when you notice that something has been broken for half a year and nobody really knew about it. And last but not least, I would like to reiterate a bit. This is my requests for comments section. So I posted the links of these pending projects or ideas that I would really like to get feedback with. One for the modern squashathons, one for this editor and tooling work group that I'm proposing, and one for the ongoing pull request that is still ongoing work, but maybe people can see where I'm going and they have an idea or any sort of feedback about it. And that would be it. Thank you very much for your attention.